everybody, welcome back to BizJet TV. Today we've got a special guest. We've got Robert Zubrin talking to us from Colorado. He's an aerospace engineer, author of the book The Case for Mars, and founder of the Mars Society. Robert, welcome to BizJet TV.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so Robert, lots of talk in the news lately about going to Mars. Elon Musk is kind of taking the center stage on this. You've been working on this project about taking man to Mars a lot longer than Elon Musk has. Werner von Braun could have landed man on Mars in the 1980s, so we hear. Why is now the time right?
Well, the time's been right for a while. As you said, NASA had plans to have humans on Mars by 1981, and they could have done it if it had not been aborted by the Nixon administration. And if they had done it, we would have had a permanent human base on Mars by the late 80s, and probably the first children on Mars would be graduating high school on Mars right about now. But, you know, we had a massive failure of political leadership. It was as if Ferdinand and Isabella had welcomed Columbus back from the New World the first time, and they had said, so what? Just burn the ships. We're not interested. And that's pretty much what happened. And then, you know, there was repeated attempts, Reagan, the first Bush, the second Bush, to restart a Humans to Mars initiative, but it got bogged down in the political process one way or another because you didn't have the same caliber of political class in this country in the 80s or the 2000s as you had in the 60s, where you had the generation that fought World War II leading the country. And, you know, John F. Kennedy was a PT boat commander, and he understood that there are things that you do that involve risk, and because he had done them. Yeah. And he was of the same speed. No one had to say, well, we can't go to the moon until it's safe or some, you know, it wasn't safe when we went to the moon, and it won't be safe when we go to Mars the first time, whether we do it my way in 10 years or someone else's way in 100 years or 1,000 years. You know, if people had had that attitude about aviation in its formative years, we never would have gotten into the air.
Yeah.
And what's happened is while NASA continues to do very good work with their robotic space exploration program and also with their space astronomy program, the human spaceflight program has become bogged down. You know, somebody once said that all great movements start out as a cause, they become a business, and then they become a racket. And that's kind of what has happened to the human spaceflight program. You know, the robotic space program spends money in order to do things. The human spaceflight program does things in order to spend money. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they you know, right now they say their objective is return to the moon, but instead they want to put a lunar orbiting space station, which is unnecessary. Before Obama said he nominally wanted to go to Mars, but they came up with, why don't we put a part of an asteroid in lunar orbit? What does that have to do with going to Mars? So these were just miscellaneous projects that became undirected.
Yeah, but don't you find now that, you know, we're moving away from the governments making the decisions to go to private industry with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos with their space?
Absolutely. As a result of two things. One, the degeneration of the government-led effort, and two, the creation of massive numbers of new fortunes, in particular among people who grew up reading science fiction or, you know, speculative science about human future in space. Mm-hmm. So, you know, well, the world is simply wealthy. You know, 100 years ago, there were maybe 10 people in the United States as rich as Elon Musk. And you could name them: Rockefeller, Harriman, Morgan, and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay, now there's at least 1,000.
Yeah.
And now most of them are not interested in space, but we've got two, Musk and Bezos.
Oh, plus Richard Branson here in England.
And then Richard Branson as well. So simply the fact that the world is wealthier, and that also creates more, as it were, sports of nature, where you have, among the very rich, certain representatives, you know, you have a higher probability that someone will pick up the vision. There's more players. And they are breathing a lot of fresh air into this. And of course, Musk has been the most outstanding of this. He has really Sputnik'd NASA. He has shown not only can he develop things that they have, or the mainstream aerospace contractors have developed, but in 1/10 the cost and 1/3 the time. He has shown that he can develop things that they had thought were impossible, such as reusable launch vehicles. And I must say that reusable launch vehicles won't just cheapen space. It will do that. It will also make possible rockets as a method of intercontinental travel.
Obviously, that's very interesting.
Intercontinental travel with expendable rockets is unthinkable.
My clients would love that. Take off in a rocket with 100 of your employees and get from London to Sydney in half an hour. That's great.
That's right. Anywhere to anywhere in less than an hour. And this is going to become possible. And I think, by the way, I did a close examination of this design that Musk has presented for his, first it was the ITS, the Interplanetary Transport System, and they renamed it the BFR, scaled it down a bit to make it more doable, which was a wise decision. And if you look at that, it actually is optimized for intercontinental travel, not for colonizing Mars. Colonizing Mars is the vision, but I think they're quite serious about intercontinental travel because that's what that system is optimized for. And in fact, you may know that they're putting the priority on developing the second stage, which is the winged thing that lands somewhere else. And that is what is needed for intercontinental travel. And you say, why would you develop the second stage of an interplanetary transport without its first stage? Well, clearly they have another priority in mind. And now, if you think about this, we only launch 100 satellites or so a year, worldwide. And now, of course, if it was cheaper, that might double or triple. But so several hundred a year. But we have thousands of intercontinental airplane trips every day. And so if spacecraft can get a piece of that market, it will expand by at least 2 orders of magnitude the number of launches that we're doing. And that is what is needed to make the cost per launch drop by 2 orders of magnitude. We have to do that. And then I think it's but a short journey from things that fly through space to go from London to Sydney, taking advantage of one of the unique attributes is no drag. It is a no drag medium. And if you think about it, aircraft were a lower drag medium than previous, and before that, ships were a lower drag medium than land transport. So this is how transportation has evolved, looking for ever lower drag mediums. But it's only a short step in that to say, well, instead of just going from London to Sydney, why don't we loop around the Earth a couple of times and then land in Sydney? Well, now you're taking 4 hours or so to do the trip, but you're enjoying zero gravity. You maybe have windows. You can get the view of space. So that's like taking a boat on a day trip, pleasure cruise.
On the lake,
on the lake, on the river, in the bay. Well, then from there you say, well, I want to stay in space not for 4 hours. I want to stay in space for 4 days or 4 weeks. Well, you don't want to keep your intercontinental transport in space for so long that you lose business. But say, well, we'll keep a cabin up there. We'll keep a hotel up there. And now you're talking space.
Well, isn't that guy in, was he down in near Las Vegas, Bigelow Aerospace?
Bigelow, yes, that's his vision. Now, when he first proposed that in the late 90s, it was really, it seemed quite unbelievable because how are you going to get to your hotel? He thought at that time that maybe NASA would develop this X-33 single-stage to orbit vehicle and that would make it possible. That program failed. But I think that vision has now been, if not vindicated, resuscitated, certainly revived with the advent of these sorts of vehicles. We're going to see these things. And now the other thing, of course, that has happened with Musk is in demonstrating that an entrepreneurial venture could do things that previously only governments could do, or it was thought that only governments could do, he's not merely demonstrated that he can make reusable rockets. He has demonstrated that entrepreneurs can create reusable rockets and all kinds of other breakthrough space systems. And so he's being emulated. Okay, there's already Bezos and Branson. Okay, but there's going to be other SpaceXs and Virgin Galactics and things of this sort. There'll be, European.
Well, you've got India is working on stuff, Chinese, the Japanese.
Yes, you'll have these things from all over the world, and you may have more than one Chinese SpaceX. Because you're certainly going to have. Well, you already have more than one American SpaceX, as it were. Yeah. And also countries that don't have much of a government space program, because like Australia. Okay.
Yeah.
An Australian entrepreneur could start his own SpaceX. I mean, provided he knows how to, either has capital and knows where to find it.
Yeah.
Now, but furthermore, you're getting other things happening as a direct result of SpaceX. There are now entrepreneurial fusion power companies. Yeah. And once again, fusion power is one of these things, this has got to be governments, or even all the world's governments collaborating on together, which actually then went much slower than when it was individual governments, because they took all the competitive energy out of the process. We're now seeing fusion startups, and I'm very happy about this. I think fusion power is entirely possible, and I think that entrepreneurs that are driven and want to get results and want to do this soon, that don't want to make this a life career, they want to get to success, that they're going to do it. And so in this sense, this thing, and then it'll be in other areas where people have thought it was impossible that this could be done in the private sector. So I think we're on the verge of the entrepreneurial renaissance, with space leading the way, but by no means being all of it. It ultimately be a small part of it.
Yeah. Now, in you compare the colonization of Mars to that of colonial America. Most of the people that moved from Europe to America in the beginning were driven by religious freedom and faith in God, played a big part in their success. I noticed that as a co-director there of the Mars Society, you have a man of faith, Bishop James Heiser. You're a man of science. Interesting team, a man of science and a man of faith together. Tell us a bit more about this team, a combination of faith and science, because it's very interesting. I thought that was something that not many people talk about, but I'd like to sort of give you some space and to talk about this team.
Well, I'm not religious in the conventional sense. I do not practice any organized religion, but I believe in a purpose-driven life, and very much so, and that significance in that life is the good you leave behind, and also there is a strand in theology that has existed in Christianity, in particular. Of human beings further the work of creation.
Yeah.
Okay. So I fundamentally believe in that. I believe that humans are creators. I believe that we are improvers of nature, not destroyers.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
I believe that we are the vanguard of the community of life from the earth. That is, if life on Earth, and this means not just people, but trees and dogs and cats and raccoons and flying squirrels, that if they want to settle Mars, we have to lead the way. Take us, and sometimes people ask me, do we have the right to terraform Mars? Make Mars another Earth? Does Mars have the right to be how it is? And to me, this is environmentalism brought to the point of insanity. Because, look, any one of them, if someone proposed, why don't we make Earth like Mars, they'd say, that's horrible. You want to turn Earth into a lifeless desert?
Yeah.
And I would agree, that would be a horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, if it's horrible to turn a flourishing Earth into a lifeless desert, then it must be wonderful to turn a lifeless desert into a flourishing planet.
Yeah.
So, there we are. So we have, our views are not identical, but we have, in certain respects, a common worldview. That there are certain things that James Heiser sees refracted through a religious lens that I see through a secular lens. Yeah. There's sometimes different paths can take you to the same place.
Yeah. No, I think it's nice to see this combination of religion and science together working for something of taking mankind out into space, terraforming Mars, creating Mars into a habitable planet. I think that's all great and perfectly in line with what the Bible teaches anyway, because as you said, man is a creator.
That's right. Yeah. It reflects a positive view of humanity, and I think that is extremely necessary in our time. And I must say that the opposite point of view, that humans are destroyers of a fixed creation, is incredibly dangerous. Because if you believe that there's only so much there and we are parasites on it, okay, that we're using it up, so there's only so much to go around, that is a worldview that sets nation against nation, race against race. That is a worldview that makes us all ultimately enemies of each other with only alliances of convenience. In fact, I believe that is fundamentally the worldview that caused both world wars.
Yeah, well, probably every war on the planet.
Well, not necessarily every war, but certainly the giant catastrophes of the 20th century were caused by that. Because, and there's a book. It was published in 1912, and it was published in German by General von Bernhardt, who was one of the chief intellectuals of the German General Staff. And it was a bestseller in Germany. It was translated into English under the title Germany in the Next War. And it basically says the world's resources are finite, and so there's going to have to be a struggle for existence, and Germany deserves to win. And fortunately, the silver lining is we are superior, and so it will lead to a better world when we get rid of everyone else. Now, these are obviously proto-Nazi point of view, but Winston Churchill read that book, and he said, these guys want a war. There's going to be a war. And indeed, if you have that point of view, even though Germany certainly in 1912 was not suffering from resource shortages, it was big, it was prosperous. If you have the point of view that resources are going to run out eventually, then the only question is, when do we want the war to occur? Do we want it now, or would time be on our side if we have it later? And the Germans decided that time was not on their side because Russia was developing, and unless we have the war now, we'll be confronted with a huge technologically developed Russia, so we should have the war now. And so in 1914 they seized on a pretext to launch it. And then again with Hitler, Germany needs living space. Germany never needed living space. Okay, I mean, Germany today is much smaller than the Third Reich and has a larger population, but a much higher standard of living. Because wealth does not come from land. Wealth comes from human creativity. And in particular is manifested in actualized technology.
Okay, so on this note,
let me
go. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
All right. So the question is this: if we have this view that we're living in a world of limited resources, then we're all enemies. If we have the view, however, that humans are, in one sense or another, engaged in a joint project to expand the human frontier, for example, by making Mars accessible and making it into a place that people can settle, that tangible a demonstration of the creative power of humanity disproves this thesis, and that's essential.
Yeah. So for any business person or entrepreneur that's watching or listening to this interview, why do you think they need to look more into this whole space thing, and what benefits could they get from a business perspective? And you just mentioned creativity and how the colonization of space can enhance this. So from a business perspective, what advantage would there be for a business person that's got their own private jet, or that's into a global business person? Why would they or why should they look into this whole space thing?
It depends, of course. The thing to look at depends on your time horizon.
Yeah.
Okay. But I would say that the immediate time horizon involves both things that are already space business, such as satellite constellations and so forth.
Yeah.
Going to vastly expand connectivity worldwide, the resource map, all that. Okay, so that's already proven itself, and someone could get into that. Okay, then there's the things that are coming, such as intercontinental transport. In other words, this is going to be as much faster than airplanes as airplanes are than ships. And, there will come a time when taking 12 hours to fly from Europe to America will seem as quaint as taking 12 days to do it in a ship seems to us today.
Yeah.
So now Musk is addressing this, but maybe he is not, how can I put it, the person who will succeed at it. There's many things involved in creating an airline beyond simply developing the technology that enables flight. So this is an area, of developing this approach. And so intercontinental transport. Once we have that, space hotels are just around the corner. Now, if we're talking about more visionary things, like a colony on Mars, all right. Now, the business plan for that isn't as obvious as the kind of things I've just been talking about. All right. So that might take a little longer, but I think it's actually doable. And let me tell you what my scenario is. Okay, this is maybe I should write a novel about this. How this happened, to kind of envision it. Okay. Either a visionary capitalist or a visionary goes to some capitalist and says, look, here's the plan. He goes to Silicon Valley or someplace like that where people appreciate the value of intellectual capital. Say, this is how I propose to have a Mars colony that will make you money. Okay, Musk has already made the cost of transport relatively cheap. And these other technologists have developed a whole series of technologies that allow us to use Martian materials to make fuel, oxygen, food, plastics, metals, all sorts of things. So we won't have to be transporting that much stuff to Mars. So we got the costs down, but where do we get the revenue? Okay, here's how. We handpick several hundred people, men and women, who are crack technologists who want to be part of the first Mars colony, who are believers, as you said, the pilgrims and others, and later the Mormons, or in our own time, practically the Jews that went to Israel, went to these places against adversity in order to create something of transcendent value. Okay?
Yeah, and it was also their faith that helped them overcome the difficulties.
Faith, but let's say you have the faith that is essential to the human future, that humans expand into space. Yeah. Okay, let's say that's your faith. Okay, because there's a lot of people who have that faith. And let's say we have some that are very firm in that faith, that's so firm that they're willing to endure danger and discomfort in order to be part of that, as was the case with many of the groups that we have just mentioned. Yeah. Okay, so you're sending these people to Mars. Okay, they could get good jobs on Earth. They have, also technical knowledges and skills, and there's comfortable stuff here. But they know they only live once, and they want to do something of immortal value. So they go to Mars. Now, here they are on Mars. Okay, a technologically adept group of people in a frontier environment where they're going to be forced to innovate and where they're going to be free from bureaucratic obstruction to innovate. Yeah. And so they're going to innovate. They're going to make all kinds of inventions driven by necessity and freed by distance from the old world. Yeah. Okay, for instance, cropland is going to be much harder to come by on Mars. It's all going to be in greenhouses, so they won't have big open fields. So they're going to do biotechnology to make ultra-productive crops. Okay, those inventions can be licensed on Earth. There'll be nothing in shorter supply on Mars, actually, than human labor power, both in volume and in diversity. In other words, we benefit on Earth from a tremendous division of labor worldwide. So they're going to have a need for labor-saving machinery, as we saw on the American frontier, actually, where they're also in both colonial and frontier America, 19th century America, there was a tremendous labor shortage here. That's why wages here were higher than Europe. And it was also, though, created a tremendous drive to implement labor-saving machinery. Farm combines, all sorts of things were developed here for that purpose. So the Martians are going to be heavy into robotics and very advanced forms of 3D printing and things of that nature that we haven't even invented yet. They're going to invent. All these things will be licensable on Earth. Fusion power, maybe entrepreneurs on Earth will develop it. If not, it'll certainly be developed on Mars because, you can make fossil fuels on Mars, but it takes energy to do it. You could import uranium, but that's complicated and heavy. But there's deuterium on Mars. In fact, it's 6 times more common on Mars than on Earth. So once again, I think that Mars will be, this Mars colony will be a tremendous engine of invention, which is going to be its export. Its exports are going to be patents. So that's how the backers of this colony are going to make money. And it's how Mars will pay for its imports. And it's also how Mars will directly benefit Earth, as, for example, the tremendous number of inventions that have come from America have benefited the whole world.
Yeah. So you're seeing that Mars is going to be like the new America?
That's right. That's exactly what I think.
Yeah.
Except in space.
In space,
Except, it's all those factors that define American character of there's always a better way to do it. Why should we do it that way just because it's been done that way in the past? Mm-hmm. This pragmatism, this works, let's just do it this way. Okay, these sorts of attitudes that are prototypical American, which come from our history as a frontier culture, I think will be, in fact, much more forcefully represented on Mars.
I mean, what's the timeline, you think, before we start actually putting man on Mars? And you think 10 years from now?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's been the case that from a technological point of view, we were no more than 10 years away from Mars since 1970. But now what we have are people who are going to attempt it, who have the resources to attempt it, and who are extremely committed to doing it.
Yeah.
And who don't have to have a consensus. One problem with a political process is you have to have the majority of players, in some cases almost all of them, to agree in order for anything to go
it's
forward.
slow. I mean, Al Gore. Al Gore was asked a few years ago if he was going to run for president again, and he said, well, since I've been in the business world, I find that as an entrepreneur, I can implement my ideas far quicker than in politics. So I'm staying where I am.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. So, if you want to get something done, do it yourself. And if you can. And now we're seeing people who can, and they're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, now, in November 2013, astronomers reported, based on Kepler space mission data, that there could be as many as 40 billion Earth-sized planets in our Milky Way, in our own galaxy. Now, as far as we've been talking about going to Mars, well, what about going beyond? They talk about wormholes, and maybe going through a wormhole could get you there in an instant. I mean, is this still science fiction, or do you think, going beyond Mars may be a reality in the next, 30 years?
Going through wormholes is still science fiction. But if I look at things that we don't have, but we understand the principles of, for instance, fusion power or ultra-thin light sails pushed by solar light, or perhaps lasers, it's the principles of interstellar travel on timescales of decades are clear. And I think we will see, certainly robotic probes launched to the stars. I think we're going to see very small robotic probes launched to the stars within a few decades, and larger robotic probes by the end of the century. Now, that said, you never know. I mean, I don't think our knowledge of physics is complete. The things that I just mentioned to you are things based on our current knowledge of physics. And I'm not a physicist, I'm an applied engineer, or I guess an applied physicist in a sense, but I'm not a theoretical physicist. I work with the physics we know, and I see engineering embodiments of it. But new physics have been discovered. I mean, 120 years ago, people didn't know about the nuclear force. They didn't know about nuclear fission or fusion. Yeah. These unlocked huge sources of energy that were invisible. In fact, there was a paradox in the late 19th century where the geologists were saying the Earth is at least 100 million years old. Now, in fact, it's billions of years old, but they could see, based on erosion features, Grand Canyon, things like this, and they had measured the rate of formation of such structures, and it was clearly at least 100 million years old. But the physicists say that's impossible, because look, we have a good idea of the mass of the sun, and if it was all made of coal and if it was burning, the most it could last is 2 million years. So the Earth cannot be more than 2 million years old, because based on the laws of chemistry, there's no way the sun could have been shining for 100 million years. Now, of course, the answer to that is the sun doesn't generate its energy by burning coal with oxygen. It generates its energy by nuclear fusion. So there was an entirely new force in nature that they were unaware of, although that fact that the geologist was saying, wait a minute, that sun is at least 100 million years old. It's actually 4 billion years old, but the geologists were pretty firm that it is at least 100 million years old. You're missing something, fellas. You're missing something. Okay, now, you take today, okay, we have some laws of physics like matter and energy, or matter energy, they can translate to each other, but the sum of them cannot be created or destroyed. And yet, here it is. Somehow, matter gets created. Okay, so there are laws of physics that have yet to be discovered.
Plus, if you have scientists and inventors sitting on Mars, who knows what they're going to discover?
Right. But whether they're on Mars or on Earth, I mean, if you're asking the question of interstellar travel, I believe that there are laws of physics waiting to be discovered, and I do think that there's a very good chance that they will be discovered in space, just as nuclear fusion was discovered in space by looking at the sun. And the laws of gravitation were discovered in space by looking at the laws of planetary motion. And general relativity was discovered by understanding, looking at the Earth's motion around the sun and its relation to electricity.
Well, Robert, without going into space, just think of electricity. How has electricity changed the way we live in the last 150 years? Right.
But my point is this, is that astronomy has frequently led physics. And we have Hubble, which has detected that the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate. There's no explanation for that within our current physics. So that shows there's new physics to be discovered. We're about to launch Webb, and the astronomers have plans for much bigger space telescopes than this. And we can have networks of telescopes on the moon. And we're going to make discoveries about the universe that could lead to new laws of physics, which could make interstellar travel a much more doable proposition than it currently appears to be under the physics that we know now.
Now, there's a lot of talk about aliens visiting Earth for many centuries and that. Do you think we're going to get to them before they get to us? I mean, how do you see it? Or are we ready as a race to meet another race from another world?
All right. Well, I do think we're going to find microbial life on Mars. Because the conditions on the early Mars were really rather similar to the early Earth. And I happen to believe that, as above, so below, laws of science are the same everywhere. If chemistry could form life on Earth, they could do it on Mars. And and now it's possible it did it on Mars first and it came to Earth in meteorites. It's possible it went the other way. It's possible they both were seeded from somewhere else. It's possible that they both developed life indigenously. But I don't think that microbial life is rare in the universe. I think it's probably quite common, and I think we're going to discover it. And in fact, just yesterday, NASA had a press conference in which they announced the discovery of methane on Mars. And methane has a finite life in a planetary atmosphere. If you have methane in Mars' atmosphere, it had to have put there recently. And it could either be biogenic, that's from microbes, or it could be hydrothermal, but a hydrothermal environment is one that can support microbes. So that's going to be interesting. But if you're talking about intelligent aliens, the whole history of life on Earth is one of development from simpler forms to more complex forms, manifesting ever greater capacities for activity and intelligence, and in fact, accelerated evolution. And so I think intelligent life is probably reasonably common. We now know, as you said, that most stars have planets, and that a lot of them are in the habitable zones of their stars. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if 1% of all stars have civilizations. Now, we haven't detected them yet. I think that there's shortcomings in the SETI group, which is looking for radio signals largely in the what's called the S band of the 21 centimeter radio. It's just a little bit higher frequency than, actually a lower frequency than the kitchen microwave. And because they came up with various reasons, but if you want to know, in 1960, when they first set the thesis forth that they would find alien signals in S-band is what we were using for satellite communication. We don't use it anymore, except perhaps in amateur satellites. It's obsolescent. So S-band radio is like gaslights. It's a technology that had its day. And if you think, the vastness of the universe, if the civilization's been around for millions of years, what's the chance it's in that 40-year time span in which S-band was the best thing? And also, now you can go to higher frequencies that we're using right now, but they're going to be surpassed in a decade or two, and so forth. I think this is transitory. I think we'd be better off looking for laser communications, much higher frequency, in the optical, much more practical from an interstellar point of view. And I think there could be other ways of communication that we're not looking for at all. And but I do think that they're out there. Now, in terms of them visiting Earth, I don't think flying saucers are evidence of alien visitors coming to Earth. I think the flying saucer, the UFO sightings are, atmospheric phenomena, Venus behind clouds.
Yeah, well, 90% of them are explainable, and I think out of the 10% that are unexplainable are probably explainable. But you've got to sort of take, whoever's telling the story is telling it from their perspective. So you've got to kind of translate that into reality. So there's probably maybe 1% that are really unexplainable.
Yeah, but they're explainable, just we haven't managed to find it.
Yeah. Or it could be just technology that the governments or some scientist has developed, and he's flying around in some fancy flying machine, and we think it's something from another planet.
Actually, I'd go into it, but there were some of the very best UFO sightings were done by U.S. Air Force pilots, and it was later revealed that they were doing it to discredit the observations of farmers and others who thought they saw something truly remarkable aircraft, which is what they saw. Yeah. And they basically you had some Air Force personnel weird them out by saying, "Oh yeah, I saw it. That was no aircraft. It could, go Mach 40 and do a right hand, perpendicular turn and stop in the middle of the sky." No. But and that's some of it. But I think it is possible, actually, if you want to know. I recently published a paper in the journal of the British Interplanetary Society entitled Interstellar Communication Using Microbes, where it's very possible to create microscopic starships composed of a little pellet, perhaps 4, 5, 6 microns in diameter, shielded with a little bit of graphite and containing a bunch of bacteria with programmed DNA in them, and then a little sail on it, perhaps 10 or 20 microns in diameter and 1 micron thick, and that gets pushed by light pressure of a star, and it goes interstellar. And if those things came here, they have such a low ballistic coefficient, which is like a low ratio of mass to area, that if they hit the Earth's upper atmosphere, they would decelerate before they would heat up, so that they'd actually survive landing on a planet coming in at very high speeds. Yeah. And if you wanted to seed life on other worlds, if you wanted to influence the evolution of life on other worlds by sending bacteria loaded with some helpful suggestions like, hey, why don't you try chlorophyll? Things like this. You could do it. And so if you say, what is the form of communication that we ourselves are most interested in doing to people we don't know? It's propaganda. And the message in propaganda is, be like us. This is Radio Free Europe. This is Radio Moscow. This is the Gideons putting Bibles in hotel rooms. It's all that message. Propaganda and propagation are related terms. And so maybe we've been visited by aliens already in the form of microscopic propaganda. And,
who knows? That's an interesting theory.
I would suggest that there be genome searches for things that look like plants. But I don't mean plants as in trees and flowers. I mean plants as in, like when the police plant a spy in a criminal organization. In other words, the things that came in from somewhere else. But and there's
if they are here, obviously they're a lot smarter than us if they've come to us before we get into them. So they probably have ways of hiding and just observing us, and who knows. But anyway, just to conclude now, what's your message for young people looking at the future?
My message is this: is that we're living at an amazing time in human history. We're living at a time, the only time of there is no parallel, okay? Because when humans left Africa, it was done over thousands of years. It didn't happen over decades. But in terms of its significance, it's as significant as the migration out of Africa. It's more significant than, for instance, the European discovery of the New World. But that's the only thing that comes close within historical memory. But anyway, look, I'm an American. If you ask any American what happened in 1492, they will tell you that's when Columbus sailed. Okay? And that is correct. That is when Columbus sailed. But that is by no means the only thing that happened in 1492. In 1492, England and France signed a peace treaty. In 1492, the Borgias took over the papacy. In 1492, Lorenzo de' Medici died. If there had been big-time newspapers in 1492, which there were not, but if there had been, those would have been the headliners, not Italian weaver's son sails some ships off to nowhere and comes back and claims he found some islands. But it's Columbus is what we remember 500 years later. 500 years from now, I believe that if we do what we can do in our time, which is establish those first human footholds, those little Plymouth settlements on Mars, okay, there will not only be new branches of human civilization on Mars, but on thousands of stars orbiting, on thousands of planets orbiting stars in this region of the galaxy. And if you ask those people, what happened in 2018 or thereabouts, they say, that's when they first went off into space. This time will be remembered because this is when we first set sail for other worlds. And young people today have a chance to be part of that. Okay? If you've got the right kind of background for it, start your own SpaceX. If you have a technical background, ally with such a person, or enlist under the banners of Musk or Bezos or some of these other ones that are going. Make yourself part of this. If you don't have the background to participate on either a business or technical level, you can
Robert,
participate on the literary level. Spread the idea. After all,
are we
who
gonna
recruited Musk and Bezos? It's writers. So there you go. Poets of the legislation of mankind.
I'm just thinking of Amazon delivering books on Mars. Yeah, who knows where we're going. Robert, it's been great talking to you. Lots of insight, lots of very, very good things. I will post below the links to the Mars Society. I know you've got a conference coming up in August.
Right.
Yeah, tell us a bit about the conference in closing.
Okay, our conference is going to be August 23rd through 26th at the Pasadena Convention Center in Pasadena, California, which, of course, is where the Jet Propulsion Lab is. It is open to the public. The fee is relatively modest, around $200 for the full conference for an adult and around $70 for a student. There'll be any number of very interesting speakers, and we're going to be discussing all sorts of things ranging from the technology of the next robotic mission and the latest reports from the Curiosity rover to plans for human exploration, plans for human settlement, to discussing terraforming, what kind of governments that we might want on Mars, private enterprise initiatives. There's even going to be a panel on religion and space exploration.
Oh, wow, interesting.
We may have some members of the cast of The Expanse come and make a guest appearance.
Okay.
To see about that. Yeah, we're talking with them. That could happen.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little bit of the Hollywood representation there as well. I think we're going to have a showing of this movie, which is actually done in Britain, called Seat 25, about a woman who decides to move to Mars as a colonist. So this is a sort of sneak preview of that movie.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have a member of the team of that production will be there. So that was done in UK, actually.
Okay.
So it's going to be great. And so they can find out information at marssociety.org.
Yeah.
If they want to give a talk on something, there's a call for papers out. Send in an abstract of 100 to 300 words on any subject relating to the exploration or settlement of Mars, both technical, political, philosophical, whatever. It'll be considered. The deadline for that is June 30th. So there's still time. If someone wants to speak, they can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And see you on the next one. Thank you.
All right, thank you.